recording. Clear the add action. 1, 2, 3. Clear air. Alright. Hello everyone at Project Awesome. My name is DutchVidya, and these are a series of instructional how-tos on the absolute basics of ACE, ACE Medical, and Task Force Radio, the three primary mods that will require you to actually do things when you're playing an operation with us. With me today is my lovely assistant Lance. Say hello.
Dude.
Thank you. This first one will cover the basics of ACE interaction, both with your own self in the virtual Arma environment, and externally with, say, another character, such as Lance. We'll start with talking about the keys themselves and what you may or may not want to change, and then we'll explain the actual mod and how it functions. ACE is itself an extension of the quintessential Arma 2 mod, the Advanced Combat Environment, which sought to emulate things like backblast, shrapnel, and several aspects of military warfare that aren't simulated in Arma. Arma isn't a true mil sim, it's more of a combat sim than a military simulator, and aspects of the base game do not exist that you would expect to exist, such as, say, backblast from a rocket launcher or shrapnel from an exploding vehicle. But at a rifleman level, which is the basic level of every single Arma player, because Arma is inherently an infantry simulator before it is a vehicle simulator, there are aspects that it adds, including basic and advanced medical systems, explosives interaction, equipment interaction, and even such things as basic gestures. So we'll start with talking about your ACE options, which you will find on the escape menu under ACE options, and there are only a few things in here you really need to change. At the most basic level, down here by client view distance, I would recommend changing these numbers. Regardless of the server settings, you can change your distance on foot, on a land vehicle such as a car or tank, or an air vehicle to whatever you want. I currently run 5,000 meters on foot and in a vehicle, and 10,000 in an air vehicle, simply because I want to see more when I'm high up, and I want to see more when I'm in a tank. And if the server settings are not to your liking, you can customize your client to go further than the base video settings will allow. But the only other settings beyond that you probably want to change are related to your cursor and keeping the cursor centered. Now I'm going to change my settings to the default here to show you what the ACE mod originally looks like. And I'll self-interact. Oh, hold on a second. I need to change this. When you first install ACE, and I'll interact with Lance to show this best, and you go to interact with someone, let's say you want to tap them on the shoulder, you'll see I have to move my actual head around to interact with things. This is, to the ACE team, the logical, most default way to do it. And at first you think, yeah, that makes sense. You want to look at the shoulder to tap someone on them, you need to look at the shoulder. In gameplay terms, that doesn't always work, because if I self-interact and I go to my medical, for example, or if I go to Lance's medical, and I go to... You notice that I'm starting to really pull my head further away, and as these menus get bigger, and they will, explosives menus can expand up to 5 times, you will go from centering your head to moving all the way up to the edges of your screen. And the best way to change that is to go to your ACE options, and set it so that your cursor is always centered, and so that this cursor is always displayed. And what you get then is... Oh, fuck that up. Fuck that setting up. You want to not keep the cursor centered. Sorry. What you get then is instead a mouse cursor itself, more like your vanilla Windows cursor, that lets you interact with things as they pop up. And that's definitely not the most realistic way to do it, but sometimes you have to sacrifice realism for balance, and this is by far the best way to do it. If you fail to set this initially, it's not going to stop you from interacting. It will annoy you, however. And these are the settings that I recommend. Not everyone agrees. Some people like to have the cursor, but not have the menus centered so that the menus actually do move. That's your preference. So that's your ACE options. There are some things in here you may want to change that are largely value of life. Text size. Do you want to perform an action on a key release, or do you want to have to set it so that you press the key again? That sort of thing. That's sort of quality of life interaction that is largely personal preference. The next big thing we'll talk about is if you go to your vanilla options menu in configure and go to controls, then the bottom here you'll see configure add-ons. Now this is actually thanks in part to the CBA mod that we run. Without that, we would not be able to introduce mod controls to the menu in this way. It would have to be in a separate menu. So we go to our ACE common, which is the biggest menu you'll spend your time in, and you'll see interact and self interaction. You can change any of these as you wish. I don't, because I only use 2 of them on a daily basis. But ACE common has your interact and self interact. For me, interact is control left windows and self interact is shift left windows. This is because as a Windows 10 user, I cannot use my Windows key on its own, or will always open my start menu regardless of whether my game is running in administrator mode or not. If you're running Windows 7, most of your interact key is probably Windows key, and it will work. Your start menu won't open and your game won't alt tab. Mine does. I'm used to this. This is what I use, and I also have a mouse macro that does this for me, so it's not a big deal. But change this to whatever you want. Are you an ESDF player? Then you probably have Alt or another key. It's all personal preference. There are a couple of shortcuts that are available. There's supposed to be a shortcut for medical menu on H that's never worked. There are some shortcuts for changing your weapons on the number keys, which attributes it to more traditional shooter. These are all personal preference. Mess around with what you want. Find a nice balance. Find what works for you. So long as it doesn't interfere with your ability to go out, shoot the enemy, and come back, it's fine. So that's your controls. That's dead simple. What we'll talk about now is what you get on a self-interact. Now, self-interact is, as it sounds, anything to do with interacting with your own virtual avatar, and it has a few states. Now, we can't demonstrate vehicles here, but I'll do that in a separate segment that I will do in another environment. I'm doing this segment here while we have our lovely assistant. Self-interact, at its base level on the ground, includes gestures, medical equipment on yourself, managing your team, and managing your equipment. If you have explosives, such as a C4 charge or wire cutters, you will encounter more actions on ACE, dependent on what you have. So as we do a demonstration of self-interaction, I'll go to my gestures, and I'll wave at Lance. Gestures are something that not everyone uses, but they're fun to have. The biggest one you'll use is the ceasefire command, because it's the most visible at distance. Medical is where you'll spend 95% of your time in the ACE menu, but that's not for this video. That is for the next one. ACE Medical is its own beast, and really needs to be dissected on its own. Team management is to do with your group itself. Now, I can't join Lance's group because he's technically in Blue 4, and I'm an independent unit. But this is where you would leave your team. It's where you would change your color of yourself and the team itself, and these will all be reflected in the Shack.cat card as you do them. And equipment, which includes, for now, weapon temperature, which helps with weapon jamming, but would also include slinging your helmet onto your backpack, or using wire cutters, or changing some scopes from picture-in-picture to 2D. The ACE menu changes. It's a very fluid interface. It will change regarding depending on what you're using and wearing. The second half of the ACE menu is external interaction. So I'll use my external interact key to interact with Lance, and you'll see he has several body parts, as well as his shoulders, and I can do quite a lot of the same things I can do on myself, largely medically related, because there is a damage model for head, 2 limbs, torso, and 2 legs. And if I go to, say, his head, you'll notice there's slightly different options. I can diagnose a patient from certain limbs. Can't do it from their arms, but from arms I can inject morphine, but I can't do that from the torso or the head, because you don't stick a morphine needle into someone's face. You stick it into their vein in their arm or leg. If I go to your legs, there we go, morphine. So your external interaction is largely to do with other players, or to do with vehicles. And if I choose one of these boxes over here, which we're not going to get to yet, but I'll choose just to explain. You can also interact with objects. So I can open things, carry, drag them, load them into vehicles, that sort of thing. The ACE Interact and Self-Interact menus are incredibly self-explanatory. You're never going to open the menu and not know what something does. It will generally tell you what it does. So if it does get confusing, don't worry. Not everything on it is necessary, but it is good to know how to access it, what options will make your life easier when using it, and exactly what it is you will expect to see when you interact with another object. And that's it for the absolute basics of ACE. There is honestly nothing really more to it than that. It seems complicated at first, but you will use it for basically bandaging yourself, bandaging another player, applying medical aid to yourself or another player, such as morphine or epinephrine, or planting explosives. You really won't use it for much else. In the next video, which I will record right now as we have our lovely assistant today, I'll explain the medical system a little bit more in depth, and we will then also explain some light explosives material, and finally we will end this session on a rudimentary basics of task force video. So if there's anything specifically that you want to see, it'll all be in the playlist on the right if you came from the playlist itself. And feel free to jump to any one of those, ask me questions on the subreddit or in the Discord, or to ask me comments on my YouTube channel. If you want to see more basic how-tos, let me know. I'm a pretty decent mission maker. I've been doing this for 2.5 years, and I'm pretty good at what I do, I like to think. So I'll be explaining some mission making basics for those who are interested, as well as perhaps some squad level, rifleman level, vehicle level, platoon level tactics, as I have a very good understanding of those, having played Arma for a long time. But this was, for all intents and purposes, a basic ACE demonstration, and I hope it clears some of the air, as there aren't many good videos explaining the mod on the internet at the moment, and hopefully this clears that up. So come back in the next one, where we'll shoot Lance in the leg.